And it's not what, at the end of the day, makes you feel good about the activities that you've been in. It gives you, the profit motive gives you a place to start, but it's not your end point.
Yeah, it's really, as I said before, the discipline that makes us ensure that we have focused rigorously on managing our costs, on pricing, on all of those things that profit really is just a symbol or a if you like, a talisman for. But it isn't the thing that animates us. We could get up and build any kind of building. It wouldn't be nearly as rewarding. Mm-hmm. This is what really rewards us. And we always joke about how we could all essentially die happy if we could see a lot of ash buildings, or at least we could know where there's a lot of ash buildings around communities, not just in BC, but all across Canada, and for that matter in the US. And we know that there are a whole lot of single moms and young professionals and seniors and working folks with modest incomes who have been able to achieve the dream of owning their own home. That would be a die happy moment for us. And that really is the thing that drives Ash and drives us.
So you've really talked in that last description about how the work that you do could transform our communities. It's by providing that housing to all kinds of diverse kinds of people who need that sense of pride and that ability to feel like their investment in their homes is part of not a right of being a citizen, but gives them the ability to participate in those things that they wouldn't otherwise get to participate in, which is home ownership.
Yeah, I think you can really think about it as creating equality of opportunity for everyone. So not everybody is going to live in a large single family home. Not everyone is going to live in a small condominium, but ideally the market should be able to provide a variety of housing choices and solutions for everyone, priced at levels that provide or create the opportunity for everyone to have a chance at owning a home. And I think a friend of mine often likens what we do he calls it the WestJet of housing.
Oh yeah.
And said, if you think back to when WestJet started, the idea was you would take folks who were generally unable to fly because they couldn't afford Air Canada or Canadian Airlines. They could afford Greyhound. And all of a sudden you were making it possible for them to fly in an airplane. And in some ways, I think I liken Ash to the same thing. We're taking folks who would generally be locked into renting, probably in perpetuity, and giving them the opportunity, if they want, to own a place. It may not be the largest place, it may be entry level, it may be something that they'll only own for a few years, but at least they have a starting point. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that we strongly believe in, that there is a lot of personal benefit for individuals and a lot of benefit for communities when people can own their own place, when they can start to build equity, when they can start to build a sense of personal wealth, however large that may be. Mm-hmm. But it really, it starts to transform a lot of the social stigmas, a lot of the problems. If you look in the downtown east side of Vancouver, some of our other tough communities, and you see what has happened when people start to get even something slightly above a shelter bed. They start to get a place that they can go to every day. It becomes the way of breaking the back on a lot of social stigmas, a lot of social problems. It's not entirely the same with Ash, but it's the same idea that all of a sudden you're giving people just that much greater degree of economic self-sufficiency, control over their lives.
Mm-hmm. And because housing can be such a big part of an income or a budget, what you're proposing would also mean that we don't have to have this chronic need for income to go up in some ways. Yeah. It's kind of a paradoxical thing because we do have to learn to live within our means more effectively, and we can't all be making incomes of 100 or 120,000. And so there has to be that niche that you're filling. If we actually believe in home ownership, you're filling something that is almost unimaginable with our current way of thinking about the economics of home ownership.
Absolutely. It's funny, in many ways it's going back to a way that we used to live and we used to think. Victoria and Vancouver are littered with examples of buildings like Ash. And it takes you back to a time when we knew how to build small, beautiful, well-designed buildings that weren't large, but they provided a really dignified, affordable space for people to live in. And you could live on incomes of $50,000, $30,000 or $50,000. You could manage to meet that sort of 1/3 of your monthly income going to housing. We got away from that. We got into this binge where we had to create larger and larger and larger homes that required ever greater amounts of income. And then, of course, we got into these wild escalations in prices over the last number of years. We seem to be swinging away from that. You look at what's happened through the global recession at the housing markets in Canada and the US, and the way that housing prices have just dropped down. And all of a sudden, the trend seems to be swinging from the idea that you have to own a large single-family home to be a real human being, to the idea that no, maybe small and affordable is just as good. It was interesting. I was down in Charleston, South Carolina in January, meeting with just a wonderful organization there called the Low Country Housing Trust, which does a lot of work in assisting folks with lower incomes to become homeowners. And we were talking a little bit about the market there, and it's in some ways it's a market much like Victoria used to be 15 or 20 years ago. But it was really interesting for them to hear them say that one of the things they're experiencing now is having developers who used to build expensive and large come and say, how do we do small? How do we do affordable? Because that's where the market's going.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether it's people in those lower income thresholds or people who had larger incomes and larger houses who are now forced by any number of circumstances to have to downsize. That's where the whole market's going. So as much as anything, I think we're seeing a global trend to swinging back towards small. And so there's a whole, I think we're going to see a whole change in the economics of housing over the next number of years. Where we start to rethink, well, why do you need big? And why, and does it make any sense that you've got to be in an endless cycle of ever-increasing incomes and ever-increasing house prices?
Yep. Yeah. No, so I'm sort of reframing my thinking about that whole sense of income. Living sustainably and living affordably really presupposes that we're not on this chronic walking up the ladder of more income, more stuff, more bigger and better kinds of things. It's I think part of the solution for us thinking about what it would take to be a sustainable community is to think smaller, to think lighter footprint, to think more out of less, which is what you're proposing.
Yeah, and there's two sides to it. There's I guess, what I would call a community ecology, which you've just described, Jane, but there's also a financial ecology, which says, do we have to continue increasing? Do we have to continue increasing prices? It's an interesting thing that comes up in a lot of discussions that I have with planners around the province in talking about ash. When I explain to them how ash works and how it's priced, they'll say, oh, just a second, let me make sure I understand this. So, but if the market's up here and you're pricing here, well, why wouldn't you just increase prices? You can. Why wouldn't you? And my answer is, well, sure we could. Absolutely. There's nothing to stop us from doing that, but why would we? Because the reason we exist is to kind of turn on the head this whole idea of what it costs to build and own a home. So we exist to demonstrate and to deliver affordable homes, to demonstrate that that can be done. So why would we want to increase prices up and be opportunistic in taking advantage of whatever the swing is in the market? It's not sustainable. We can operate very profitably and very successfully as a company by keeping prices low. And by doing that, being able to demonstrate that you don't necessarily need to have government driving home policy or housing policy. The market can, with the right kind of support from government, respond, and it can deliver affordable home solutions.